Welcome to the standard. Modern life tells us what to want, what to buy, and who to become. But here we investigate the ideas, the desires, and the assumptions that shape the lives we're building. And today, our investigation is why expensive things stop feeling exclusive. You got the better version. So why didn't it feel the way you expected it to? There is a moment that's quite hard to explain, but it's easy to recognize. You get the better version of whatever it is, the more expensive one, the thing you've been considering for some time. You've been comparing, you've probably been justifying spending the money to. The one that felt like a level up. I know you know what I'm talking about. And for a very short moment, there's this ever so quiet sense of satisfaction. It's not loud, it's not overwhelming, it's just enough to feel like something's shifted, like you finally did it. And then almost as quickly as that sense of satisfaction arrives, it starts to fade. Not completely though, but just enough to notice that it's an anticlimax. And that's enough to really start wondering why it didn't last the way you had expected it to. Because it used to feel different. There was a time when expensive things carried weight. And I don't mean just financially, but more so emotionally. They felt rare, considered even, earned and elevated. It's probably what's drawn us to it as well. But there was this distance, between actually wanting something and having it. And that distance is, I believe, what is part of what gave it meaning and desire. You thought about it longer. You chose more carefully. You experienced the whole thing more fully once it was yours. But that distance, it's starting to quietly collapse because access has changed everything. What used to be difficult to obtain is now just a few clicks away, essentially. The same brands, the same pieces, the same aesthetic, it's all available, and it's available instantly. And it's not just to you, it's for everybody. So while the price may still be high for some things, the experience of acquiring it is no longer. There's no tension. There's no anticipation, no chase, no pause. Just decide, purchase, arrive. And without that space in between, I feel like something very subtle disappears. Because exclusivity was never really about the object, if we're being honest. Because it's easy to assume the feeling came from the thing itself, the quality, the craftsmanship, that status that's attached to it. But what made something feel exclusive wasn't just what it was. It was how it was experienced, the time it took to choose, the restraint it required, the clarity behind the decision. Exclusivity wasn't just external, it was an internal feeling and experience, right? What you're actually experiencing when something stops feeling exclusive, it doesn't mean that your standards have dropped. I think if anything, they've probably risen because you expect more. You're exposed to more, you've experienced more. And what once felt like a really significant step, it now just feels normal. And normal doesn't create that same emotional experience. So you look for the next level. You want something slightly better, slightly more refined, slightly more you. But the pattern repeats because the issue was never the level. And a really subtle shift most people miss is what you're feeling isn't dissatisfaction with the object itself. It's probably more so the loss of that contrast. Everything around you improves, right? Your baseline quality quietly moves up. What you once stood out with now blends in. I hate that too. What once felt really elevated now feels somewhat expected. And without that contrast, nothing feels particularly special, even if objectively it is. And that comes down to the role of expectation, because that's the next layer most people don't see. When you're buying something with the expectation that it will feel different, you're placing an emotional demand on it too. You're asking it to create a shift, to mark progress, to signal the growth, to feel like a moment. And sometimes it does, but only briefly. And that's because objects won't or don't stabilize feelings. They just amplify them temporarily. And when that amplification fades, you are left exactly where you started, just with something new. And why this pattern continues? Well, that's because the initial moment works just enough, just long enough to reinforce the behavior you buy. You feel something. You associate that feeling with purchase. Right? You with me? So the next time you want to feel that again, what do? You repeat the action. Not consciously, of course, though, but consistently. And over time, that gap between expectation and reality is widening. And it's not because the things are worse. It's because that feeling you are chasing isn't something that can be sustained, right? The reframe, it's not about expensive things losing value. It's about understanding where the value was actually coming from in the first place. It's not the object, but it's the experience around it. It's the decision, that anticipation, the meaning you attach to it. I know, my girls, you know what I'm talking about. Half of the fun is in the chase, right? So when those elements are missing, the object itself it's just left to carry the entire weight. And it's not designed to do that. So what actually changes the experience is surprisingly not buying less, although that sometimes works well. But it's more about becoming intentional with why you're choosing the item. I'm not going to tell you have to avoid nice things, but just separate I want this from I want to feel something, because they're not the same thing. And when they get blurred, nothing, absolutely nothing is ever going to fully satisfy you. So a different way to approach it is, before you purchase something again, just pause, take a breath. And it's not to stop yourself. It's about observation. Observe that moment before the decision. What are you expecting this to do? What feeling are you attaching to it? What do you believe will be different after? Because the more clearly you see that, the less you are going to rely on the object itself to create this shift. And the more likely you are to choose for what it is, not for what you hope it will do. Just let one sink in. Because expensive things, they didn't ever stop being valuable, but the way you experience them changed. And once you understand that, you stop expecting things to carry the weight that they never could. Decide well.